Good afternoon, everyone. This is our final examination of CDI for a recorded video. And first, as interrogations. It is a process of obtaining an admonitions of confessions from those suspect to have committed a crime. It is confessional in a nature, which means the suspect is confronted about his participations in the commission of an offense. So, example of interrogations is a detective interrogates a suspect in a robbery case. The detective presents evidence such as surveillance videos and fingerprints and asks the suspect pointed the questions about their whereabouts during the time of the crime. Number two is interview. It is the simple questions of persons who cooperates with the investigator. These are witnesses who voluntarily gives their accounts about the commissions for crime. So tawag ani ang interview is a person so cooperate with the investigator, mga tao nga nasa crime scene, nakakita sa kuan sa mga nahitabo is sila ang makig-istorya sa mga investigator para mohatag og unsa ilang nakita. Number three is emotional appeal. This is a technique where the investigator combining his skills of an actors and the psychologist addresses the suspect with an emotions appeal to convince. It is applicable to first-time offenders or those who are of these emotion types of characteristics displayed by their nervousness or emotional disturbance. Devotes of religions may belong to the type. So, example of emotion appeal is in a case involving a young offender, the investigators appeals to the suspect emotions, saying, "Think about your parents. How will they feel knowing you did this? It is not too late to do right things." So, istoryaon sa investigator ang isa ka suspect nga hunahunaan nimo kung unsay mahitab ay unsay mahunahunaan sa imong parents kung nakabalo sila nga gibuhat ni nimo, then gitagaan po niya og gamay nga kuan, gitagaan po niya gamay nga advice nga dili pa ni late para magbag-o. Then number four is sympathetic approach. The investigator in his preliminary or probing questions must dig deep into the past troubles, plight, and unfortunate events in the life of the suspect. An offer of help, kindness, friendliness may win his cooperations. So, ang example of sympathetic approach is an investigator is speaking with a suspect who has had a difficult past. The investigator shows understanding towards their struggles and offers help leading to building trust in cooperations. So, ang investigator is makikistorya siya sa isa ka suspect nga ihang kalmahon og istorya nga gitry og sabot sa moingon ang investigator nga kasabot ko sa imong past kung unsa imong kalisod, then inya mo offer dang isa ka investigator nga dili tagay ko og chance nga tabangan ta ka og makig-cooperate ka sa kuha. Number 5 is friendliness. A friendly approach coupled with a posture of sincerely may induce the suspect to confess. Friendliness, the example of friendliness, the investigator use a friendly tone and manner making the suspect feel more comfortable and less defensive. Defensive. The investigator might say, "We're just here to figure out what happened. I'm not your enemy." So ang kani is ang isa ka investigator is makig-istorya siya sa isa ka suspect with a calm nga pagka-istorya og dili nimo siya ipa-feel nga nahadlok siya, dapat ma-feel niya nga comfortable siya, then moingon ang investigator nga nako diri para tabangan ka, then tagaay pod ko og tagaay lang ko og knowledge para makabalo kung unsa ang nahitabo. Number 6, tricks in bluffs, the pretense of solid evidence against the accused. The investigator bluffs the suspect that even if he will not confess, there is enough evidence to send him to jail. If he will confess, the investigator will see to it that his prison terms will be within the range of probations. Tricks in bluff example, an investigator might pretend to have more evidence than they actually do. They might say to the suspect, "We have a clear CCTV footage of you at the crime scene. It will be better for you if you confess now." So, Andrea is hadloko nilang isa ka suspect nga bisag pag di ka mohatag og confession is mahibaw-an gyapon namo kay tungod daghanay may evidence nga nagpamatuod nga ikaw ang nagbuhat na may clear nga CCTV footage. Then mas kung mo kuan ka, kung mo confess ka nga ikaw ang nagbuhat is naay posibilidad nga mas mugamay pa ang imuhang pagkakulong. Mugamay ang years sa imong pagkakulong. So number 7 is drama. The weakest link may be used to fake pain and agony by ordering him to shout, accompanied by banging a chair on the wall. It make it appears that a commotion is going on. The other suspect in separate rooms must hear the drama before telling them that their partner had confessed. So number drama example is an investigator stage a dramatic scene to make other suspect believe that one of their complices has confused. They might have an officer shout and bang chair against the wall, then tell the other suspect that their accomplice give them up. So that's an example of drama. And number 8 is feigning a contact with the family members. The suspect could be tricked that the investigator had gone to the residence and the family members had supplied facts against the suspect. The suspect family will be dragged into the investigations if the suspect will not confess. Feigning contact with family examples is an investigator might tell the suspect, "We spoke with your family. Your brother told us everything." This may prompt the suspect to confess in order to protect their family members. Number 8, the lineup. The lineup complainant. Witness or victim is requested to the point of positively the suspect who is among persons in the police lineup. The witness, victims, or complainant are previously coached about the identity of the suspect. The lineup example is the victim is asked to identify the perpetrator from the police lineup. Prior to the lineup, the victim is coached on how to be identified the suspect. And number 10 is reverse lineup. The suspect is placed among other persons in a line up and he is identified by several complainants and witness who will associate the suspect in other several crimes. This will cause the suspect to become desperate and confess only to the case under investigations to avoid from being charged on false accusations. So example of reverse lineup, suspect is placed in a lineup with several others. Individuals, multiple victims, and witness identify the suspect as the perpetrator of various and other crimes. This might be prompt the suspect to confess the original crimes to avoid being charged with these additional crimes. Number 11, presence of physical evidence. It is the presence of laboratory of scientific findings pointing to the suspect. So example of this is the investigator place a file on the table and says, "Our lab just sent us this day. Found your fingerprint at the scene." In reality, the file may contain unrelated documents or may be empty. The aim is to make the suspect believe that there is solid evidence against him. And number 12 is jolting in the questioning process. The investigator select the right moment to shout a pertinent question in apparent righteous outrage. The suspect nerves will break to confessions. So the example of this is the investigator calmly question the suspect about their day and their activities when they suddenly shout, "Why did you kill her?" and why. And the unexpected intensity may cause the suspect composure to falter, making them reveal more than they intended. So number 13 is indifference. In the presence of the suspect, the investigators will discuss and debate about the strong evidence of the case that will result to a convictions of the maximum penalty. Their aim to their aim is to induce the suspect to confess by conditions his mind that he is finally concerned with no other recourse but to confess. The example of this is there is two investigator could sit in the room with the suspect discussing the evidence in possible sentencing as though the suspect wasn't there. They might say things like, with this amount of evidence, the judge will definitely give a life sentence. This can make life suspect feel concerned and might cause them to confess in hopes of a lesser sentence. Number 14 is figuring protections and considerations. The investigators ask series of questions appearing to be formalist with the impressions that he knows the answers. That these questions are asked as a matter of considerations of the rights, protections, and the advantage of the suspects. And the example of this is the investigator might say, I'm just asking these questions to make sure your rights are protected. And we already knows a lot about the case, so this is just a formality. These techniques can make the suspect feel less defensive and more likely to offer informations. Number 15 is opportunity to lie. The suspect is given all the opportunities to lie. The suspect is questioned about his personal life, family, friends, and his knowledge about a complainant and witness. Then the suspect is questioned about his activities prior, during, and after the commissions of the crime. This is repeatedly many times to include the investigator focusing his questions about knowledge of the suspect of the crime. The suspect will be in a meshed in contradiction, which is now capitalized by the investigator to get the truth from the suspect. If the possible, the interrogations must be taped recorded for purpose of emphasis during the confrontations of the contradictions. The example of this is the investigator asked the suspect about their alibi, their relationship with the victim, and their activities around the time the crime. The suspect answered are recorded and repeated back in the future interrogations. In any consequences, their story are highly used to pressure the suspect into telling the truth. The investigator might say, you said you were home alone last night, but now you're saying you were at the friend. Which one is it? So, ang last example ni is ang victim is interviewon sa isa ka investigator habang nag-investigate sila, ay nag-interview sila sa isa ka victim, is mag-record sila. Then i-otro-otro na og pangutana sa isa ka investigator. Then ang katong una nga istorya sa isa ka suspect is recorded to. Then mag-ask sila balik-balik about ana nga na panghitabo. Then pag naay isa nga mamali ang suspect sa iyang istorya tong last is diha gid mayabo ang suspect kay tungod na ang pinakauna na gi-answer sa isa ka investigator is recorded. Number 16, processing and securing a crime scene. Processing a crime scene includes the diligent and the careful methods by an investigator, policeman to recognize and identify the preserved facts and items of evidentiary value that may assist in reconstructions which actually crime scene is the area surrounding the place where the crime occurred. The processing the scene includes all direct traces of the crime, and this is determined by the types of CR in the place where the act occurred. So the example of this is the processing and securing a crime scene. In the case of a robbery at a jewelry store, the investigator would first secure the perimeter to prevent any contaminations of the crime scene. They would then begin to process the scene by identifying the potential pieces of the evidence, such as fingerprints, footprints, and any left behind objects that could be potentially be linked to the perpetrator. All these pieces of evidence will be preserved and documented for further analysis. 17. Protecting the crime scene and the evidence. Successful crime scene processing. The policeman's or investigator's skills in recognizing and collecting facts and items of value, and upon his ability to protect the preserve and later to present this in a logical manner, making careful and detailed notes and sketches, using correct procedures in taking photo, scene, taking writing statements, and transcribing verbal statements of witness, and marking the preservations of the collected physical object of the evidentiary natures. Example, during a murder investigations, the crime scene will be cordoned off with crime scene tape to prevent unauthorized individuals from entering the potential compromising the scene. The investigator will take a detailed notes of the scene, drawing, sketch of the crime scene, layout, take photographs, and collect and preserve any physical evidence such as weapons, blood samples, or any other items of interest. The investigator would also interview witness and take their statement for further reference. So, example in additions is in the crime scene daw is once sa murder is ang buhaton sa isa ka investigator is mag-gordon siya sa isa ka crime scene para malikayan ang mga sulod gawas sa mga persons. Then after that is mag-sketch siya sa crime scenes, magkuha siya evidence nga pa example ng weapon, blood, samples of any items of interest. Then ang buhaton po sa isa ka investigator is mangita siya witness nga iyang ma-interview para sa statements for future reference. Number 18, strip search methods. In these methods, the area is blocked out in the form of a rectangle. The three searches is A, B, and C. Proceed slowly at the same place along path, parallel to one sided of the rectangle. When a piece of evidence is found, the finder announces his discovery and the search must stop until the evidence has been cared for. A photographer is called if necessary. The evidence is collected and tagged in. The search proceeds at given a signal. At the end of the rectangle, the searchers turns and proceed along the new lanes. B. The double stripe of grid methods of search is modifications of a strip search method. Here the rectangle is traveled first parallel to the base, then parallel to a side. An example of this is suppose an open field is the scene of a crime where shooting was occurred. Investigator would block out the area in the form of rectangle. Their investigators A, B, and C will begin to walk parallel along one side of the rectangle, stopping whenever a piece of evidence such as a bullet, shell is found. Once the evidence is collected and tagged, they will continue their search. Upon reaching the end of rectangles, they will turn and proceed along the new lanes. So, number 19, spiral search methods. In these methods, the three searchers follow each others along the path of a spiral, beginning on the outside and spiral towards centers. In case of a crime scene, this is the example. In case of a crime scene in a forest, the investigator would start from the edge of the forest and follow the spiral path leading into the centers of the forest. This would be done in order to make sure that no evidence is missed, as the investigator will be covering every bit of the forest ground. Number 20, zone search method. In this method of search, this area is considered to be approximately circular. The searchers gather at the center and proceed outwards along radial or spokes. The procedure should be repeated several times depending on the size of the circles and number of searchers. One shortcoming of this method is the great increases in the area to be observed as the searchers depart from the centers. An example, in the case of crime scene, in the large of circular area like a park, the investigator would start from the center tunga, and proceed outward along radial lines or spoken. As the investigator move further away from the center, the area that they need to observe increase, which makes this method more challenging. However, this method ensures that all areas of the park are covered in the search. Collecting evidence. This is accomplished after the search is complete. The route sketch finished in photographs taken. Fragile evidence should be collected as they are found. So the example, this is after a burglary, an investigator finds a piece of fabric torn from the burglar's clothing. They photograph the fabric and placed in carefully collect it using gloves to avoid contaminations. This piece of fabric could be potentially match a garment from a suspect and therefore serve as crucial evidence. Number 22. Tagging or evidence. Any physical evidence obtained must be tagged before its submissions to the evidence custodian. The example of this is the investigators find a blood-stained knife at the scene of a homicide. They label it with the data locations in case of number before packaging it properly for transport. This ensures that the knife can be corrected, identified, tracked through the investigations. Number 23. Evaluations of evidence. Each items of evidence must be evaluated in relations all the others evidence individually and collectively. Example, in a hit and run, case paint chips from the scene are compared with the paint of a recovered suspect vehicle. This comparison is done both visually and chemically to confirm whether they match. 24. Preservations of evidence. It is the investigator's responsibility to ensure that every precautions it exercises to preserve physical evidence in the state of in which it was recovered obtained until it is released to the evidence custodian releasing the essence. An example, after retrieving a firearms from a crime scene, the investigator ensured that it is unloaded and secured it in a rigid sealed container. It is prevents and any change to the firearms or the loss of trace in evidence. 25. The scene is not released until all processing has been completed. The release should be effected at the earliest practicable time, particularly when the activity has been closed or its operations curtailed. An example, once all evidence has been collected from a home burglary is seen, the investigators officially release the scene back to the homeowners who can then begin cleaning up the repairing any damage. 26. Interrogat. After a robbery, it is important to investigate how the offender got in. It is of important to find the entry route, which is not necessarily a door. Look at the building from the outside and try to find the traces of a break-in or other damage to doors or windows. Check the functions of the lock and check whether there are any peaks of marks. So the example of this in the case of cooperations, espionage investigators discovered that the perpetrators gained access to the company system through the backdoor in the code. Was not a obvious entry point, but its discovery is crucial to understanding the crime. 27. As the victim finds out from the victim was what has been stolen and where there are traces of objects being moved by the perpetrator, that is the place to look for the trace evidence. An example of this is as the victim, an investigators interviews robbery victims and asks detailed questions about what items were stolen and where those items were located. The victim's response guide the investigators' search for trace evidence. 28. Latin footwear prints. Paper on the floor is always of interest since there may be a Latin footwear prints on it. Collect all the papers and then look for footprints on the papers at your unit and send the papers to the crime scene's laboratory for examinations. There may also be a Latin footwear prints on desks, pads, chairs, sets, and etc. An example, at the crime scene, an investigators collect a piece of paper with suspicious shoes impressions. The impressions is later analyzed at a forensics lab and matched to a pair of shoes belonging to a suspect. 29. Section 5. Repealing Cause and Republic Act number 857 as amended is heavily repealed others laws, presidential decrees, executive orders, or rules and regulations or parts or thereof inconsistent with the provisions of the act are repealed or modified accordingly. An example, after a new law is passed that provides more comprehensive protections for endangered species, and other less effective laws is repealed. This ensures that there are no conflicting regulations about these issues. And number 30, Section 1, Statement of Police is it is the policy of the sensitive to value the dignity of every human being and guarantee the full respect of human rights. And after a series of unfortunate incidents involving the mistreatment of the prisoners, the Senate passes the policy that emphasizes the importance of respecting the human rights in all correctional facilities. This is policies serve as a guide for a future legislative in regulations.